Grace and Peace began in the living room of Ted and Gladys Smith. That was its first building, so to speak, its first site, its first locale. And then moved from there to Kingsbury and De Pere, a little storefront. And I don't know, Ted and Gladys might have been glad to get everybody out of their living room, probably in dining room, right? I imagine their neighbors were probably a little glad to have the car congestion go away. So we all started packing into Kingsbury, and then we're there for several years, and then moved to this building in the mid-'80s. So, we're here to talk about Ted's work, and in particular, his choices, why he went in the direction he went at various points in his life. Originally, we were going to just talk about the portraits this Sunday and then talk about the graphic and liturgical work next Sunday. But because of the way the scheduling worked, both Sunday school classes couldn't shut down. So that would mean that half the possible constituency would get to hear about the portraits, and the other half of the constituency would get to hear about the graphic and liturgical. And I thought, well, that's not really fair, because I always have an appetite for everything. So Ted and I are going to try and touch on everything. And of course, this means too that if you have further questions at a later date, you can always talk to him after church or at any other church meal or gathering. So, Ted, do you have a preference where you want to start? I see you have notes.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Bruce interviewed me, and the interview is printed in the program, which there's a few of them left.
I think there are. We can certainly get more printed.
Yeah. His first question was, I believe, when did you start drawing? Well, I started drawing during the war, the big war, and the subject matter was airplanes, tanks, soldiers, trenches, barbed wire, all of that stuff. And the airplanes were Stukas and Messerschmitts. Those were the German. And I got into 3D pretty early. One of my relatives had given me this elaborate chemistry set with very stale old chemicals. So what I liked about looking at them, holding them, was their beauty. Test tubes, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Beakers, and so on. Pipes that would be, glass pipes that would be joined with a rubber connection. So anyway, we had a nice space under our staircase going down into the basement. So I labored for an hour or two, maybe, setting up this laboratory with pipes going everywhere, and beakers and all this stuff. And the end of the story is that when I went upstairs to announce for people to come down, my mom and dad, when we got down, it was a shambles. I have a brother who's always been in competition with me, and so he decided that he would, make his statement. In any case, that was pretty devastating. But in the long run, what did I learn from that? What did I learn from that? I think I learned to do more, and be careful where you put it. So when I walked in here this morning, that last one was gone, and oh gee, did somebody swipe that? No, it was Nancy rearranging or remounting. Okay, well. Let's see. All right, well, I took art in high school. We had a very good teacher, or at least somebody that we really liked. But I don't really remember much of what we covered in that course. I do remember drawing some cartoons for the yearbook and the school paper, but that's about the extent of my memory about that. And I wanted to take time to talk briefly about 3 experiences that I've had that I think have really shaped my thinking for better or worse. I was visiting my uncle and aunt and their many children down south in Arkansas. And I loved going there because, well, they had all these animals. My cousin had a goat cart. You could get in the cart and away the goat would pull you and so on. So it was fun to be there. And anyway, we decided to take a swim. And I thought, well, where in the world are we going to swim? There's cornfields, cotton fields, gardens, cows in the pasture. Well, there had been a government project in that area of the country, and they dug ditches, a network of ditches to keep the water flowing, irrigation. But we could swim in it. So anyway, we were on our way down to the stream. I was barefooted, I guess everybody else was. And I came to this place, and I had to look down and see what was I walking on. It was like talcum powder. It was this wonderful texture. It was dust. It clicked with me. The dust could provide such a sensation and be such an amazing thing in our environment that we just kind of take for granted, or when it's in the house you want to wipe it up, get it out of there. Another one, I had a cousin who reminded me of Davy Crockett. He was older than me. He and his folks lived in this little crossroad called Walcott, Arkansas. And he had a collection of arrowheads. He had 2 5-gallon cans filled with arrowheads. And then he had some teeny ones that were for birds or whatever. And they were in another box. He had an axe head. All this stuff had been found in that locale. So our previous inhabitants had really been there and done things. Well, what I want to tell you about him, we call him J.L., and he was clever with a pocket knife. So on one trip, he decided, let's make some boats. Well, I thought he meant boats, but he meant boats. And he made 2 or 3, and then we took this walk. And we were walking through this glen, that's the best way I can describe it, that was right next to their Baptist church. And when you got down the hill and into this thing, it was magic. There were tree branches all over you. There was a path that led through it. And at the other end was a mom and pop filling station, odds and ends, canned goods, kind of shop. So that's where, and candy jar.
Okay.
So that's what we're heading for. Anyway, he took his boats with him, and off we went. When we got down to the creek at the bottom of this hill, as I say, there was this wonderful atmosphere. Here's this wonderful stream with sand on either side flowing through. my cousin took out one of the little boats and wound it up. He had put a rubber band on the paddle wheel, and he put it in the water, and off it went, you know. And then he put another one in. That sounds like a sort of incidental kind of thing that kids will do, but I never forgot that. The beauty of the place and the magic of that little item, that little object, flitting around the water, and that could be made with a rubber band and a piece of cheese box wood. Then there was a biggie. This is when I was 12, maybe. We went to a Bible Presbyterian, it was called Bible Presbyterian Church at that time, in Afton. And there were two Smith families, our Smith family and the Dairy Smith families. They had a dairy out in Kirkwood. And it was called Sturdy Farm Dairy. Well, my buddy, who was of my age, we would swap on Sundays. He would come to my house, which I thought, well, that must be boring. Then we'd go to his house. There were vines, there were peach trees, there were cows all over this pasture, and there were, it was just wonderful. I thought it was paradise. And when you got to that table, it was a huge circular table, not quite as big around as this circle, but big. And every other place had a quart of milk sitting there. That was part of the table setting. I didn't forget that either. But anyway, we were always roaming the place, going out and not stealing, but just helping ourselves raise. And I'll tell you a really negative little thing. Every summer, this father, the father of these guys, who was blind, would give them a bald haircut. So everybody, the three boys, were running around with bald heads. Well, Dan and I were out there sucking grapes while we were squirting them into our mouth and all that. We just enjoying and drooling and all. And out came little Phil with his bald head. And we thought, let's throw the hulls on Phil's head. So it ended up being a cap. And all three of us were just, beside ourselves, laughing and rolling around at this ridiculous thing that we had done. And the kid, he didn't know any better, he couldn't see it. And so he was laughing too. That's just a sideline. But the main thing that I had, the main experience I had there was more, I guess I'd call it mystical with a loose sense of the word. It was just an experience I'd never had before, and it stunned me. We went out through the pasture to the pond, and it was not the kind of pond you'd swim in. The cows used it for drinking, and if you got in there, which we attempted, you'd go up your shins in mud. So it wasn't exactly an inviting place from that standpoint. But anyway, there was a nice little knoll that overlooked the pond, and it was a lazy day, and I could hear the bees buzzing and so on. So I just laid down in the grass and whatever growth was there. And I looked up, and I couldn't see anything but blue sky. There was not a cloud in the sky. I couldn't see any peripheral stuff, weeds, trees, nothing. Just the blue sky. And it terrorized me, scared the daylights out of me. Because I thought, what if, I didn't know about gravity, but I thought, what if it would let loose and I would plummet up into that endless space? Just scary as a dickens. that also helped me to develop a sense of awe, which was very positive. So that, you know, you get a setback, you think, and then later on you say, oh wow, that really paid off. When I think of it now, I don't think of the terror, I think of paying attention to what's around, just even the empty spaces, as well as the trees and the mountains and the rocks and all that. So it was a profound experience. When I was 6 or 7, and even before, my mom would read stories to us before we went to bed. My mom was, she had eighth grade education, and one of the amazing things about her is that she could recite the alphabet backwards and forwards, just rapidly, and get it all right. And that one of the teachers she had in her little one-room schoolhouse thought that was important. She said, it's been a plague, because when I'm looking up something alphabetically, in the dictionary or whatever, you know, I'm baffled, but where, you know. But anyway, she liked to read to us, and so we'd gather around at bedtime, and she'd read us a story. I wanted to mention a few specifically, I won't go into it, but we read, this was a biggie, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that was when I was first really, as far as I remember, introduced to man's inhumanity to man. I mean, as she read, we sat around the circle, we cried, and she said, well, shall I stop? No, keep going. And it was profound. And then Bambi, of course, we read Bambi. And there was a series of books called The Sugar Creek Gang. Now this was a group of preteen kids who would get into mischief. One of them was called Poetry because he liked ditties. One of them was called Big Jim, and there was Little Jim, and Bill, the narrator. But anyway, they just would have good, fun boy games and tricks and everything. But anyway, there's always a mystery involved with the thing. What happened to so-and-so? They were here last week, they're gone. And so they would solve the mystery. So that was always enjoyable. Because there was always you knew you were going to go enjoy the ride, and then there was the conclusion that it was good. Okay. Right. Oh, yeah. Now, that wasn't visual. That was imagination and so on. Hearing. The funny papers, that's what we call them. Do they still call them funny papers? Anyway, there were funny papers. Every day you got, these installments. But on Sunday they really pulled out all the stops, and it was full color. And there was a couple of twins called the Katzenjammer kids. Now they were kids of German immigrants. So there was this interesting cultural mix. German immigrants, the father and the mother spoke little English, and here were these kids getting into all kinds of mischief. And one would try to outdo the other. So that was fun. Then there was another thing called Sleepy Hollow. That was taken from the book with that same name, I guess. But anyway, Sleepy Hollow was a story about a possum. And he lived in a little tree, the trunk of a tree. There was a little door, there was a little light, his the number of the house and so on. But the thing about it, when you got inside, and you did, you approach, here's this lovely setting, and here, oh my goodness, there's a door there. What's in there? So anyway, you would go in, and then, lo and behold, it was spacious in there. It was spacious. So he had all the usual array of furniture and so forth. So that's one that did something to me. You can drastically change something, a perspective, a concept, and so that stuck. Okay, how are we doing? How are we doing?
We're doing okay. I went,
Okay,
Keep moving.
I'll speed up. When I went to college, I realized that they offered art courses in college. And no, I didn't know from nothing. And so I thought, well, that's what I'll do. Well, naturally, I had to get a lot of preliminary English and math and so on. I had to get that out of the way before I decided on a major. Somebody give me a lesson on it. But once I decided, I was really excited. They had a great art department, and a wonderful faculty. And the other thing I want to bring up is that I was up there in the second floor hall, and I saw this young lady hanging pictures in the hall. This was from a wonderful artist. He was a painter, he was a designer, he had the whole bag, you know, and everything was just wonderful, and this girl was beautiful. And she was interested in art, and so that sort of got some wheels turning. And here we are.
yeah.
All right, let's fast forward. I worked for a number of companies here in St. Louis doing art, drawing, diagrams, etc., which we also did in the Army. I was in the training aids department, and we made all kinds of stuff for educational purposes. And Gladys worked right by my side until she got so big that she had to drop out for a while. And that's when Kathy and Betty came upon the scene. Well, anyway, in a month or so, she was back at it with us. And this was a bunch of Army guys. Everyone had been drafted. Nobody had volunteered. So they were, there was a guy from MIT, there was a guy from another technical school, there was a guy from Long Island, there was a guy from Chicago, and two guys from Chicago. And this one guy was just so talented. And part of his drawing equipment was a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He was a real tall guy. And then there was this cigarette always hanging. And as soon as that one was empty, as soon as that one was gone, he'd put another one in, off he'd go. But the things he created were just wonderful. He did the signage around the post, and it was just so clever, so pleasant. And by the way, when Richard was born, when Richard was born, he made us this wonderful little announcement, and it was a little story, like given from a radio. The speaker was at the mic announcing our new child and so forth. And I gotta find it, but I haven't. It's lost.
It's there somewhere.
But anyway, one of the things I did, there was also an elderly lady that worked in the department, and she was from Pennsylvania, one of the bases up there, and she had done work with a Leroy. I think Sansan knows what a Leroy is. Does anybody else? It's a device for doing lettering. You have a sort of a needle that you follow indented letters on this piece, And then the other part of it is an ink pen. So if you followed the groove, follow the letter form, that's a groove, you were also writing the letter. I thought it was pretty clever. So anyway, we did a lot of that. And this little old lady from Pennsylvania, she had moved with the military police, which is where I was. And she was unusual. She was fastidious to a fault. Every morning she would clear off her desk with a Listerine-soaked rag. And if we were cleaning up on a Friday, sweeping and so on, she would take Kleenex and poke them up into her nostrils. Well, anyway, she was such a character, and the guys had such a warped sense of humor. You know, if she was talking too much about something, kind of drilling it into the ground, somebody would say, "Shut up, you old bat!" You know, whoa! And it didn't bother her. She was fine with it. And anyway, we were in a barracks-type building, and the source of heat was a pot-bellied stove, which chucked wood in. That was how we kept warm. Okay. Well, I guess I ought to get back to CPR. Okay. When I was discharged, we came back to St. Louis, but then that was my home. But before we settled in, Gladys and I, over the Christmas break, had taken a look at the St. Louis Art Museum. And I guess I'd count this one as mystical too, this experience. The art museum used to have this small little room, about a quarter of the size of this. And in it, it was sort of maybe medieval Spain, I think was the decor, maybe a little later. In any case, there was this wonderful staircase out of crude wood that led nowhere. I mean, it just led up to see it, but it was an artifact. And there was a bubbling fountain, little thing, bubbling up, many openings, and then there was gravel around it in the center of this tile-floored room. Well, on the wall was this magnificent picture by El Greco. It was the resurrection of Jesus. And we both, I don't know what happened, but the sun was coming into the room through a golden window, and here we are looking at this thing, and we're in love. I said, let's get out of here. And so we went out and sat on the lawn. It was a warm December. So we sat on Art Hill, and I asked her to marry me. And she didn't hesitate, which was very nice. So, okay. When we got back from the Army, that's where I went to school, the two of us, well, as I told you, we were there at college at the same time. When we got back, I didn't have a job, of course, and my parents lived next door to a fellow who worked for Concordia Publishing House. And he knew that I had been artistically trained, and that I needed a job, and he said, well, we need somebody, why don't you come down and apply? So I did, and I won't go into the details there, but I learned a lot of stuff about not only drawing things, but how do you produce that? How do you get it printed? What are the steps that you have to go through? And so that was very educational for me. The other thing that happened was the department was split up, and I was asked to assist this elderly lady, sweet as she could be, Swedish. She was the book designer, and she taught me how to do it. And that was, there was no computer, of course. She did these wonderful tissue layouts for sample pages in the projected book. And so, every line of text was penciled in. The large display type penciled in very accurately. And so she taught me how to do that. And so that certainly whetted my interest in lettering and type. And so anyway, I spent how many years? 13. 13, thank you, Courtney. And probably the highlight for me there was I designed a prayer book, which was called the Daily Office. It was red leather bound, beautiful, gold, and I used this wonderful Garamond typeface throughout the thing. And it was a very complicated typographic job because there was everything. Quotations, scripture passages, prayers, on and on. And the manuscript came in, I kid you not, in a box that was about the size of the bushel basket. That was the manuscript. Now, how in the world? When I looked at that, it said, you have to make a book out of that. I was just flummoxed. And the other thing, the manuscript was from several different authors, and they used different typewriters. So you had pica size and then smaller. Well, it was my job to project how many pages that would make. And I think that's the only mathematic enterprise I've ever been successfully involved in. I hit it, give or take, by 24 pages. It was a lot of pages. It was on thin Bible paper, I call it. But anyway, beautiful book. And I submitted this because every year the American Institute of Graphic Arts had a competition for the 50 best books in the country, design, best book design. And that one made it. And that was beyond my wildest dreams. And so, unfortunately, I thought I would be going to New York to accept the award. But my boss decided she'd go. So, that was a setback. But anyway, where am I? Okay, let me get into something else here. When we speak of art, what are we talking about? When I was at WashU as an adjunct teacher, I was just amazed at all the things they taught over there. I think I've got them all here. Ceramics, photography, fashion design, drawing, painting, printmaking, sculpture, silversmithing, and graphic design. Well, I won't pass this around, but back at Bob Jones, when I worked for, as Gladys did, for the art department, cleaning up and stuff, one of my teachers, a new guy who had just come in, and I liked him from the time I saw him. He wasn't the straight-laced kind of people that were there. And, he wore corduroy pants or a corduroy jacket, I guess, and no tie, and just a neat little guy. Anyway, he was a designer, and he was to produce ads for the school. So on this one occasion, I was working in there, and I was just sort of looking over his shoulder, and, no computers, folks. He had sent out for proofs of the manuscript, so he cut those up in little sections, and he had photographs, what's the word for copying them cheaply? Stats. Photostats made to position them on this double spread. And so I watched him, he would pick up something over here with his X-Acto knife and place it here, and then he would do something here, and then he would move this, no, that's not right there. So anyway, by the time he got it together, I was hooked. I said, this is what I want to do. And so I never looked back. I mean, that led to my teaching career and led to these, my working firm. Concordia, Monsanto, McGraw-Hill. When I was at McGraw-Hill, we had a visiting group of kids from WashU, and they're wonderful, wonderful teacher. He took them through the publishing house there. We didn't do any printing there, as we had back in Concordia. But anyway, he showed them all the where all the financial stuff takes place. Can we produce this thing? What kind of materials can we use with that kind of a budget? So there was that. And then there was an editorial board, and the designer that was assigned a given book, or whatever it was, would sit in on that. And that was a mixed bag, believe me. I bring in layouts for this, I would think I'd gotten the right artist, artist, to do the drawings for this thing. And so often they would, no. So I had to learn to conform to the more mediocre, run-of-the-mill image. I wanted some life. But anyway, after we got over here.
Eventually,
Oh, yeah. Oh, the tour, back to the tour. Dick Brunel brought in a group of 12 or so kids, and they toured. And afterward, he had seen what I had done there, and I think somewhere I had met him before. But anyway, he saw that I was designing books, pages, with photos and so on. So he asked me if I could teach a class over at WashU, sophomore magazine, book designs. So I did that. I took him up on that. Now, I don't remember how I worked that around my schedule at work, but anyway, I did. And these kids came up with just wonderful, wonderful stuff. They were just so creative. And I was seeing their creative stuff that I was not seeing. I was not seeing at McGraw-Hill. So that was just a real pleasure. Well, anyway, he looked at what we had produced, and he asked me, on the basis of that and the finished product that these kids had done for him, right? He just thought it was so good that he asked me, would you be interested in teaching at WashU? Well, did I take to that bait? And so the upshot is I made a career out of part-time day and part-time night school. I made a career. It was easy because nobody else wanted, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people wanted to teach the night school. So we didn't live that far away. I could walk over there and do it, and so I did.
That was 26 years
Where?
at WashU.
In WashU? Okay, yeah.
Ted, I want to have a little time for people to ask questions.
Sure. Let's
too.
do it. Let's do
Can
it.
we kind of fast forward to when you decided to go to Fun and pursue your master's and touch on the portraits here, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, okay.
And then next week, you can kind of focus on the second half of your life.
Keep going. Keep in the right channel. Yeah, I did. I took off a semester and went to Fun, and I tried print making, and that was a disaster. Working with that nasty ink, and it was terrible. I saw what other people did. I thought, that's miraculous. I know how to do it. But I took painting and drawing, and those were good experiences. But I think I kind of realized I wasn't going to be a painter. And so, anyway, when I finished that, I got the master's degree, and then went back and taught some more at WashU. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop there.
Well, I just want to throw out one question, and then we can kind of go from there. But I've come to refer to these charcoal portraits as your hero portraits. And I guess I'm curious what in life brought you to decide to kind of immortalize individuals in this fashion. Why large charcoal drawings? And two, why these individuals? So we're very used to, up to this point, seeing you working in graphic design, hard edge, font, text, copy, placement. And then all of a sudden, to some of us, it's like, whoa, there's this jump, and all of a sudden we're working vigorously with messy charcoal, expressively used, very emotional subject matter. And I'm just, if you could describe for us kind of how you got there, and perhaps why these individuals.
Conrad Aiken, the one on the left, was an American poet, and he wrote a book that was one poem, several pages, and it was titled "Thee," and it was kind of a rant. You know, I guess he was explaining how can we believe this? This world is so awful, you know. So anyway, I empathized with that thinking, and so I wanted to do something on him. So there's a brief quote there. What?
These were all people you were
Yeah, yeah. And maybe the size, maybe Chuck Close was at it.
Right. Well, there's other influences out there, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, that's Conrad Aiken. And the next one is Gladys on Madeline Island. That's where we did a couple or three summer vacations. And she was, I don't know if you were around the fire or what, but it was windy and nice and pleasant up there. And so I took a photo and worked from that. The next one is Walker Percy, a Southern writer. I think at the end he called himself a lapsed Catholic, but I'm not sure he was lapsed. I think he was a real believer. But if you want to start reading anything by that guy, it's The Movie Goer. That's his wonderful book, all of them. Oh yeah, here John Merriman is over here with the horn-rimmed glasses and the cigarette. I read him, and for the most part couldn't make heads or tails out of it.
He's a contemporary poet.
Yeah, right. And he published several books to acclaim and so forth. Boy, I just couldn't see it. But the guy jumped off a bridge and killed himself. And I thought, well, I got to do something with that. And so that's the reason I did that. Then the next one is a drawing of the German hero during World War II, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who most of you probably know, was involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler. And he was found out, he was put in prison and hung on or near the day the Yanks came in and liberated. It was a terrible, terrible situation. The last one over here was a South American president, let's see, El Salvador, yeah. And he and his political party and their followers had been engaged in a conflict with, they weren't called Sandinistas, but they were guerrilla warfare out in the sticks and so on and so on. And you know, they just couldn't get on top of it. So he very courageously somehow communicated with one of their leaders and said, I want to meet with you. And they said, fine, but you'll meet here in the jungle, And you can imagine, they had not spared prisoners before. And so you can imagine how emotionally caught up he was to do this. He knew he was doing a good thing to try to get peace. And I just was so impressed with that he would put his life at their mercy. And I don't know that it really solved the problem with him, but I think eventually they got on top of the situation. But there's, you know, in most of the South American countries, there's extreme political views, left as right. So that was the reason I did that.
So the flowers.
Oh yeah, the flower. Okay, that was his peace.
That's the peace offering, the
Peace
flowers,
offering.
yeah. Did you sit down and make a list of, or it's just like visually came to mind?
Yeah, I read Thee,
Right.
and I decided, read Walker Percy, decided,
Uh-huh,
Barron, with frustration.
yeah,
And, so,
right. And why charcoal?
because it would be quick, and, yeah, I wouldn't have to spend too much time.
Okay. So it had an immediacy without a lot of pre-planning?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because of course, what I'm seeing here is two sides to your creative personality. The graphic arts person tweaks things and moves things a 16th of an inch and says, there, now it's fine, right? Okay? Lot of planning, a lot of control. And even when you look at the large liturgical panels in the hallway, those aren't freely executed, those are preliminarily drawn and graphed out and laid out. So there's a lot of planning that goes into a very specific interest in a very specific form. All right? But then when you moved into charcoal on paper, there's not a lot of pre-drawing or preparation that goes on, you just go at it.
Yeah.
So it is a much more emotional approach. And in some sense, because you know the history of these individuals or have tried to, you're somewhat invested or aligning yourself with them on some level, some
One of the
way.
things that some people probably don't know is that when you work with charcoal, half the time you're working with an eraser.
Yeah.
So, you know, to get the lights, after you've done your preliminary work and drawn lines where they shouldn't be, you're erasing, but also to highlight things like the eyes and some of these guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for the face of El Presidente,
Yeah, yeah.
you can tell where he's lifted out charcoal, the bridge of the nose and the brow. And
Translate in Spanish, it's the president.
yes, it does. Thank you, Bob. President. So, did you find that after so many years, you know, working in the concepts of graphic work and display, which then naturally went over into your desire to express your faith concepts through those same kind of materials, mediums, and graphic art, what we refer to as liturgical art. And a lot of liturgical art we have as in our collection here is very graphically based because a lot of it was designed and done by Ted over the years. And then also by other artists in the church that were influenced by Ted, so forth and so on. But did you find it to be a relief than to move into this much more emotional, outward emotional approach using charcoal? Or was it something you kind of got out of your system and then
I got it out.
and went back? So, yeah, there are a lot of artists today try and work in a variety of styles, where that used to be, critics would say, oh, well, the artist is immature because he hasn't resolved his or her style, that there should be one definitive style. And artists started to rankle against that. They said, well, no, I want to be a great painter and a great printmaker and a great sculptor, and I want to do abstraction, I want to do still lifes, I want to do everything and do everything well. But to some extent, most artists have one particular medium, form, or whatever that actually is closer to their heart, that is their preference when they're not trying to prove themselves. And I think Ted has a graphic sensibility that is unrivaled in any that I have met. And when he said he wanted to show a lot of his graphic work in this show, so forth on the panels here, I kind of quaked in my shoes. I'm like, oh my gosh. One, how are we going to display it? Are we going to be able to display it well enough to suit Ted and not damage the work? Because these are all unique pieces that are on the wall here. So he doesn't have multiple copies of these things. So even though they originally may have been editions, they are no longer. They are now limited works and so forth. So, but knowing Ted's graphic sensibilities, I wanted to be able to do justice, but then at the same time I was so excited to see this step into something that in some ways is more personally expressive. I mean, a lot of us have heroes in our life. What do we got here? 10 ways, 5 minutes. We have heroes or people we look up to or people that we read, or someone says, you know, I'm really bored with my reading list right now, what do you recommend? And a lot of us have the author right away. We say, oh, have you ever read? So forth and so on. Or if you're a lover of a particular literary art form like poetry, you have your favorite poets and so forth. And so Ted kind of took this journey into the heroes, or in some sense asked himself, who do I look up to? Who would I emulate? Or who would I know that I couldn't hope to emulate?
I would hope that you have time to read the poems
Yes.
and quotations. They're terrific. They're wonderful.
Right. Well, and here we have a graphic artist very much in love with font, which for those of you who don't know is the different styles of lettering, to the point of specifying what kind of font he wanted in the little booklet that we printed up, Garamond. And yet here, with these charcoal works, he put those words on there in a very emotional way, not the exacting graphic designer way, but he wrote them with his own hand in charcoal. So we're, in a sense, with this show, we have this opportunity to see the full artistic personality of Ted Smith, or at least as much as he's going to let us see at this point in his life. So,
well, I'd like you to see the three pieces of art, quote unquote, the lower three over there. Have a look at those. The bear waving his toothbrush was part of a submission to an author to see if I could do her book. And lo and behold, I did it.
mm-hmm.
And but the other one, the original drawing of the guy with the book and the Groucho nose, that was done for a bookmobile. It would be painted on the side of a bookmobile, and it was soundly rejected.
Darn.
So,
No sense of humor there.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, speaking of Ted's books, I'll just say this and then we're going to open up to questions because we do have to exit in just a couple of minutes. Ted did a couple of children's books during his graphic career. One of them is called God and Me in paperback, and I've gone a-digging on Amazon and have found multiple copies. Now, some of them are inscribed to someone like Tuzak, but They're still in good shape, and we're going to sell these during the holiday art sale, which we're going to be selling artwork in the gallery. So there's God and Me, and then You and Me. There is a copy of this in the church library. These are a little harder to find in the hardback, in good shape. So keep that in mind, and they'll be relatively reasonably priced. But so smell a little musty. Okay, so we have time like for one question. Has anybody got a burning question that, yes?
I've got a burning question. You told us about the beautiful artwork of the resurrection, and you went outside and proposed to Miss Gladys, but you never told us what she said.
And she said yes.
And was the first kiss then, or was that later at the wedding?
It may have been.
I think it was, yeah, we were all out in the world, everybody could see. Yeah.
We went to this very strict school, so there was no kissing or even hand holding. So that was really the first kiss.
So next week, now we have to exit out of here very quickly, so grab food on your way out. Because like I said, those of us that brought it really don't want to take it home. Next week, Ted will talk again.